Welcome back. So you know we've been covering the trial of CMPD officer Randall Carrick. Joining us right now, local attorney Corey Rosensteel knows quite a bit about the case, has been following it, talking to a lot of people involved with the case. Corey, thank you for joining us. First question I want to ask you so far is, what do you see as the highlights for both the prosecution and the defense up to this point?
Well, I think that what the prosecution is going to have to emphasize is the use of force expert that they've had that has established on their side that he used excessive force. I mean, that's really what the crux of the case is. Everybody knows he's the one that fired the shots. So there's not really a question about was the shot fired, but was it appropriate to do so?
Okay, and we're coming up on, this is the third week of testimony in the case. Closing arguments again start tomorrow. In your opinion, has this case kind of progressed faster or slower than you had originally imagined? I
think that most people think it's going a little bit faster than usual. The jury selection probably took about what they thought it would, about the amount of time that they thought it would, but I think the presentation of the witnesses has probably gone a little bit faster than everybody anticipated. I think that the judge had planned on 6 to 8 weeks. Of course, he wants to be on the cautious side, so this wrapping up at this point is probably a couple weeks faster than they'd feared it would be.
And you're a local attorney out here. You're familiar with a lot of the folks involved in this case. What's the attorney gossip? What are you hearing from folks?
Well, I think everybody was curious to see that video. There's certainly the turning point, I think, in a lot of people's opinion, whether that's the general public or other attorneys looking on, none of us had access to that video, and so I think that watching the video certainly answered some questions as far as what was going to be shown to be the victim or the person who'd been killed, what his actions were prior to the shooting, and I think that answered some questions for everybody.
In your legal opinion, was the viewing of that video helpful more towards the prosecution or to the defense?
Well, that's tough to say. And the jury gets the benefit of watching every piece of evidence and hearing every argument. And they're instructed by the judge not to make decisions until after closing arguments, not to make a final decision on what they think about that evidence until they've had the benefit of hearing both the prosecution and the defense take on that evidence. And so I think that everybody is going to have a little bit of a different opinion on that. Of course, I think that everybody was interested to see whether the movements were aggressive and how quickly things were happening. And I think that was important for the defense in this case.
Okay, and then last question. You've been following the trial through media reports. You've been following fairly closely. Based off the evidence that you've seen presented so far, do you see the prosecution having enough for a conviction of voluntary manslaughter for Officer Carrick?
Well, I think that's going to come down to how the jury views those experts. What the jury really is going to have to make a decision on at this point is which pieces of fact do they want to value and weigh heavily. For instance, you can't see everything on that video. They're going to have to decide whether they want to take the officer's version of events or perhaps one that's been posited by the prosecution. They're going to have to decide whether, under the circumstances that they view as the most likely set of facts, they think that they can believe the prosecution's experts who say this was not a justified killing, or the defense experts who are saying this was self-defense and this was necessary and it was appropriate under his training.
Gotcha. Some great insight. Corey Rosensteel, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Kayla, go ahead and send it back to you.
Well, it was a muggy and